The question hangs heavy in the air of every age. What would you do if the most powerful ruler on earth commanded you to deny your God or face death? Long before empires rose and fell into dust, before names were carved into stone and later forgotten, there lived a young man whose quiet faith would shake kingdoms. His story begins not with triumph, but with loss. In the days when Jerusalem still stood and the songs of worship rose daily from the temple, a distant thunder approached from the east. Babylon was coming. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched his armies across deserts and rivers until they stood before the walls of Jerusalem. Judah's strength was no match for the empire that had mastered war and conquest. King Jehoiakim saw the writing before blood was spilled. He surrendered. No city was burned that day. No siege engines battered the gates. Instead, Judah bent its neck beneath Babylon's yoke. Nebuchadnezzar entered the city not as a destroyer, but as an owner. He took treasures from the house of the Lord, holy vessels crafted for worship, carried away and placed in the treasury of foreign gods. What had been set apart for the God of Israel now sat beneath idols that could not speak or hear. Yet the king desired more than gold. He summoned Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, and issued a command that would change lives forever. "Bring me the finest youths from Judah," he said, "young men of royal blood and noble families. Let them be without defect, sharp in mind, quick to learn, pleasing in appearance. I will train them to serve in my palace." Ashpenaz obeyed. From among the sons of Judah, boys barely grown into manhood were selected and separated from their families. Among them was Daniel. His name meant, "God is my judge," a name spoken with prayer by parents who never imagined their son would grow up in exile. He was likely no more than 15 years old when chains of fate pulled him away from everything familiar. Alongside him were three others, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, friends bound not only by youth, but by faith. The journey to Babylon was long and merciless. Day after day they walked beneath an unforgiving sun, the land changing as their homeland faded behind them. With every step, Jerusalem became a memory. The songs of the temple grew quieter in their minds, replaced by the sounds of a foreign tongue. Then Babylon rose before them. Its walls seemed to scrape the sky. Gates of blue-glazed brick shimmered with images of strange beasts and gods. Towers and temples dominated the horizon, proclaiming power, wealth, and dominance. This city was designed to overwhelm, to erase the past and rewrite identity. Babylon did not merely conquer nations, it absorbed them. Daniel felt it immediately. Everything here pressed against his soul, urging him to forget who he was, who his God was, and where he came from. The training began at once. For 3 years, the young exiles were immersed in Babylonian language, science, history, and religion. They studied omens, myths, and the wisdom of the empire. And then came the final act of erasure: new names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, honoring one of Babylon's gods. Hananiah became Shadrach. Mishael was renamed Meshach. Azariah was called Abednego. Their names, once testimonies to the God of Israel, were replaced with titles meant to bind them to Babylon's gods. It was a subtle violence, changing names, reshaping minds, rewriting loyalties. Then came the food. They were offered rich meals from the king's own table, meat prepared according to pagan rituals, wine poured out to idols. To eat was to participate. To accept was to compromise. Daniel felt the weight of the choice settle in his chest. No one would have blamed him. Survival depended on obedience. Resistance could cost his life.
But Daniel resolved in his heart that he would not defile himself. Quietly, respectfully, he approached Ashpenaz. He did not accuse, he did not rebel, he simply asked. "Please," he said, "test your servants for 10 days. Give us only vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare us with the others." Ashpenaz hesitated. His fear was real. If these boys grew weak, the king would hold him responsible. His life was on the line. Yet God was already at work. Ashpenaz agreed. For 10 days, Daniel and his friends ate simply, while the others feasted. When the time ended, the result was undeniable. Their faces were clearer, their bodies stronger, their eyes brighter. They looked healthier than all who had eaten the king's food.
God honored their faithfulness. He gave them wisdom beyond their years, insight beyond their training. And to Daniel, he gave something more, an understanding of visions and dreams, mysteries hidden from human sight. That gift would soon place Daniel directly in the path of a king's fury. One night, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed. He awoke with his heart racing, his spirit disturbed. The dream had shaken him to his core, yet its details slipped from his memory like sand through fingers. He knew it carried weight, destiny, but could not grasp it. In desperation, he summoned the magicians, astrologers, and wise men of Babylon. But he did not ask for an interpretation alone. "Tell me the dream," he demanded, "and explain its meaning. If you cannot, you will be destroyed. But if you can, you will be honored above all others." The court froze. They pleaded for reason. "Tell us the dream, and we will interpret it." But the king would not yield. "You are stalling," he accused. "If you cannot do this, there is only one penalty." The wise men spoke the truth in fear. No king has ever asked such a thing. Only the gods could reveal this, and they do not dwell among men. Nebuchadnezzar's rage ignited like fire. He ordered the execution of every wise man in Babylon. When the order reached Arioch, commander of the guard, Daniel's name was on the list. Daniel met the threat not with panic, but with calm. He asked questions, he sought understanding. Then he went boldly to the king and requested time. That night, Daniel gathered his friends. They prayed, not with polished words, but with desperate hearts. They begged the God of heaven for mercy. And God answered. In a vision of the night, the mystery was revealed. Before dawn, Daniel praised God, not the king, not himself, God. Then he went to Arioch. "Do not kill the wise men," he said. "Bring me to the king." Standing before Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel spoke without pride. "No man can do what you ask," he said, "but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." He described the dream exactly as the king had seen it, a towering statue of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay, shattered by a stone not cut by human hands. He explained its meaning: kingdoms rising and falling, human power fragile before divine sovereignty, and at the end, a kingdom established by God himself, one that would never be destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar fell to the ground. In that moment, the greatest ruler on earth acknowledged a power greater than his throne. Daniel was elevated, his friends promoted, and the God of Israel was proclaimed above all others. Yet pride is patient. Years later, Nebuchadnezzar built a massive golden image and commanded all to bow. Music filled the plain. Thousands fell to their knees. 3 men remained standing: Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They were accused, threatened, given one last chance. Their answer was simple and terrifying in its faith. "Our God is able to save us, but even if he does not, we will not bow."
The furnace roared hotter than ever. Soldiers died from its heat. The 3 men fell into the flames. And then the king saw it. Not 3, but 4, walking, free, unharmed. The fire that killed others could not touch them, and the 4th figure shone with a presence not of this world. They emerged without even the smell of smoke. Nebuchadnezzar praised their God, declaring that no other God could save like this.
Years passed. Another dream humbled the king himself. Pride drove him from his throne into madness until he lifted his eyes to heaven and acknowledged the Most High. Empires shifted, kings died, Daniel remained. Under Belshazzar, sacred vessels were mocked at a drunken feast. A hand wrote judgment on the wall. Daniel interpreted it without fear. That very night, Babylon fell. Under Darius, Daniel rose again. His enemies conspired. Laws were twisted. Prayer was criminalized. Daniel prayed anyway. He was thrown into a den of lions, sealed behind stone, left to die. But God shut the lions' mouths. At dawn, Daniel walked out alive. The king proclaimed the living God to all nations. Daniel grew old in exile, faithful to the end. He lived to see hope restored, the promise of return declared, the exile ending. He had been taken as a boy, but he outlasted kings, fires, and beasts. His story teaches that faith is forged in quiet obedience, courage without guarantees, humility after power, and trust when the world demands surrender. He stood when others bowed, and God stood with him.